Paula Droege, and this is my search for a material soul. I've started to think of these breaks as marking seasons. So there's a new numbering system with this as Season 2, Episode 1. Last season, I looked at ways meaning figures in our lives. I think of the search for a material soul as a search for meaning or purpose in the physical world. Though many people think religion is about heaven or morality, my primary interest is in the way life is immeasurably enriched when we connect to a power beyond ourselves. As I've said, Lutheran theologian Paul Tillich called it the power of being. The central question in my search is how to think about power and being. As a materialist, I root explanations in the world of bodies. Maybe there's a supernatural source of being, but my mind, consciousness, and soul are material. Or so I believe. I've already given reasons to think that the mind and consciousness are material. Look at Season 1, Episode 4, In the Beginning, and Season 1, Episode 6, Consciousness is not the soul. Thinking about how the soul could be material is basically what this video project is about. One of the most puzzling and important aspects of being is emotion. On one hand, emotions seem to be paradigmatically mental, as the title of the wonderful animated movie about emotion, Inside Out, attests. Your feelings are inside, the deepest part of yourself, knowable only to you. On the other hand, there's good reason to believe that emotions are part of the physical body. It's hard to imagine being really joyful without that light feeling in your chest and a smile on your face and bouncy energy, or feeling really fearful without the adrenaline rush and quick heartbeat. Well, there is certainly more to emotion than the bodily feelings. Later, I'll discuss the view that emotions are predictions of what is likely to happen. I think physical changes are essential. Considering the evolutionary development and value of emotions can help make the case for their physical basis. At root are simple positive and negative stimuli that shape the behavior of every living organism. To maintain homeostasis, an organism seeks nutrients and avoids toxins. As nerve systems become more complex, the range of possible responses expands. Maybe a situation is a little bit dangerous but promises great rewards. Fear provides a way to boost fight or flight responses while harvesting the available resources. Shame and guilt arise when the social value of group cohesion is important. At the level of the society, the cognitive influence on emotion is so strong that it can be tempting to think that that is the only factor in emotion. This seems to be the view of the constructive theory of emotion. According to neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett, emotions are not bodily responses to stimuli in the world. They are cognitive predictions about what is likely to happen in the body and the world. In contrast to her theory, the classical view of emotion holds that emotions are universal types, hardwired into human nature as responses to environmental stimuli. Research done by Paul Ekman in the 1970s and 80s showed that people across many cultures classified stereotyped faces according to the same categories dubbed the Big Six: anger, sadness, joy, surprise, disgust, and fear. While these categories are indeed familiar in Western culture, Barrett argues that we are taught these concepts as ways to interpret our bodily feelings. It turns out that every participant in Ekman's studies was taught these concepts by the task of matching the face with the list of Big Six emotions. These six were the only categories given to choose. The building blocks of emotion are simply valence, that basic positive or negative evaluation, and arousal, how high or low the energy level is. In a particular situation, my negative low energy is felt as sadness because it's a cloudy day and my writing's not going well and my back kind of hurts. In another situation, that same bodily state might be interpreted as a different emotion, as anger at the latest political outrage over which I have no control, or as simply a bodily state like tiredness due to lack of sleep. In her constructed view, Barrett treats emotions as predictions of the situation based on past experiences. We apply emotion concepts to generalized bodily feelings in order to produce the response that's likely to be most useful. What puzzles me about the theory is the causal order of events. Do we get the bodily feelings first and then use prior concepts to interpret them? That makes sense to me and is how I describe the process of interpreting my feeling as sadness. Or do we apply our concepts to a situation and then manufacture the bodily feelings appropriate to it? The way Barrett talks about emotions often seems like this. Experiences are simulations of what is happening in the world based on predictions, suggesting that emotion construction is primarily a top-down process. I predict and simulate the world, and that causes me to construct an emotion. What worries me about the construction view is that it shares a lesson with the pop psychology book from the 1980s by Norman Vincent Peale called The Power of Positive Thinking. As a negative thinking teenager, I was completely convinced that I had finally found the solution to all my problems. I wrote quotes on note cards, memorized passages. My new positive attitude helped me notice the ways in which I contribute to my own stress and anxiety. When recalling good and bad events, successes and failures, I would focus almost exclusively on the bad things, on my failures. My internal monologue was filled with warnings and self-criticism, rarely with praise or delight about future possibilities. Positive thinking gave me valuable insight, so what's the worry? Because of course it wasn't the solution to all my problems. Even with my repertoire of quotes and newfound insight, I still got depressed and anxious. Positive thinking, or any top-down, concept-driven view, fails to adequately account for the ways stimuli and homeostatic imbalance generate emotional response. Revising our concepts can be useful in altering responses to a situation. That's why talk therapy or reading the right book can be life-changing. But emotions are not simply constructed by concepts. Mind and world are in an ongoing dance with one another. The world sends information and the mind interprets it in order to accomplish its goals. The difference between an interpretation and a prediction is subtle but important. An interpretation, or representation, as I talked about it in Season 1, Episode 4, is a structure that varies in accord with what it represents. When my brain represents a football, some neural structure has the function of varying in relation to the football. When I see a football, I'm not predicting a football or simulating a football. I'm seeing a football here in my hand. Similarly, when I'm sad, I'm representing the bodily state in a particular way. My sadness is not a prediction or a construction. It's the way I'm feeling. I might misrepresent my bodily state as sad when I'm really tired. So emotion is not a hardwired response to a stimulus, as the classical view maintains. In other words, I like Barrett's emphasis on the variability of emotions. People respond to situations in very different ways and express them in different ways on different occasions. I don't like Barrett's claim that emotions are constructed. Bodily changes are how we feel our emotions, and the power of emotion to color an event as joyful or fearful determines our responses to it. The role of the body gets especially tricky when there seems to be no reason for having a particular emotion. Sometimes I get depressed even though nothing major in my life has changed. The pressure builds in such a way that it shuts out all joy. Budding daffodils, energetic class discussion, even dinner with good friends just don't help. This isn't a prediction error. The situation reminds me of phantom pain that feels as if a hand is clenched so tightly the nails are digging into the palm. Yet there is no hand and no palm. So what can be done? A remarkable solution was discovered by the neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran, who devised a way for people to see the missing limb. When looking at a mirror image of the intact arm clenching and unclenching while thinking about both limbs doing this action, severe and lasting pain can be relieved. I would explain phantom pain as a misrepresentation of sensory signals as pain from the absent hand. The mirror image leverages that representation, mistaken though it is, to shift how those signals are interpreted. Could there be phantom depression? Misrepresented emotional pain? Where phantom pain is a mental state mistaken about its bodily cause, my depression seems to be a bodily pain that's mistaken about its mental cause. When I get depressed like this, I look for a reason in order to relieve the pain. What's happening? Why am I so miserable? It seems as though the cause of depression must be mental, since the phenomenon itself seems entirely mental. Given the physiological basis of depression, however, the cause may be entirely physical. Poor sleep, hormone imbalance, or low glucose level. Barrett's construction view offers new tools for thinking about what concepts and culture contribute to the formation of emotion categories and how revising and expanding those categories helps to manage emotion. But concept revision won't help when I'm depressed for no reason. I need to recognize the bodily source of my feeling and either ride it out or try to adjust my internal chemistry. And here I need to admit that I haven't read the full catalog of Barrett's published work, so she may have a good explanation for this situation, or I may have misunderstood the role of concepts in construction. If you want to learn more about Barrett's view, I highly recommend her book, How Emotions Are Made, and the many podcast interviews she's done. I'll include a link to her website in the notes below. The bottom line is that the forces of both mind and body need to be accounted for in order to solve the mind-body problem. As a materialist, the problem is made somewhat more tractable by explaining how the mind is actually part of the body. Even so, there is an explanatory difference between the activation of a representational structure like depression that's caused by menopause and the activation of that structure due to turmoil in my emotional life. This issue, the problem of mental causation, is a big topic and one I'll tackle eventually, but probably not this season. More compelling right now are issues like free will, good and evil, the evolutionary value of religion, and the related issue of ritual in religion. Other issues may come up as I relax into my summer reading and thinking schedule. I'm also open to suggestions, so leave a comment about what you'd like to hear about. I'd really love to hear from you.